Hi guys, welcome back to Calc5 videos. In this video, we're going to be talking about question 5 from 2018 calculus free response problem. Alright, for this problem, we're given two important information. The first one is f of x function defined to be the product of e to the power of x and cosine x. We're also given the graph of g prime x. Alright, in the first problem, it says find the average rate of change of the f of x function on this interval, which is 0 less than or equal to x less than or equal to pi. So if you remember how to find the average rate of change, we use this formula, f of b minus f of a over b minus a. So basically, we're going to be using this formula for the f of x function over this interval. So it's going to be equal to f of pi minus f of 0 divided by pi minus 0. And that's going to be equal to, if I plug in pi, we get e to the power of pi times cosine pi minus e to the power of 0 times cosine 0 divided by just pi. So we know that cosine pi is -1, so this is going to be equal to negative e to the power of pi. And we know that cosine 0 is 1 and e to the power of 0 is also 1. So 1 times 1 is 1 and minus 1 over pi. So that's the average rate of change for the f of x function over this interval. Alright, let's carry on to part B. In part B, it says, what is the slope of the tangent line? So basically, the slope of the tangent line at any point is also equal to the first derivative value at the same point. So which means we're going to be finding the first derivative of f of x. If I apply the product rule, I'm going to end up with this expression, e to the power of x times cosine x minus sine x. Okay, that's the derivative. So if I evaluate this first derivative at x equals 3 pi over 2, we're going to be finding the slope of the tangent line. And that's going to be equal to, if I continue from here, so e to the power of 3 pi over 2 times cosine 3 pi over 2 minus sine 3 pi over 2. Okay, so we know that cosine will take on the value of 0 when it is 3 pi over 2, so this is going to be 0. And sine is going to be -1, so -1 times negative will be positive, so the answer will be e to the power of 3 pi over 2 times 1, or just e to the power of 3 pi over 2. So that's the slope of the tangent line at 3 pi over 2. Alright, let's move on to part C. In part C, it says find the absolute minimum value of f of x function on this time interval 0 less than or equal to x less than or equal to 2 pi. So if I want to figure out the absolute minimum or absolute maximum, first I need to figure out the first derivative of the function. Then I need to set it equal to 0 to figure out the critical points. Then I need to test critical points and also the endpoints in the original function to be exact. Alright, so let me wipe off the board before we do that. Okay. So part C, if you remember that we've got the first derivative as e to the power of x times cosine x minus sine x. We're going to set this equal to 0. So we're going to set e to the power of x equal to 0, and this is not possible. So the cosine x minus sine x has to be equal to 0. And we got cosine x is equal to sine x. And the satisfying values will be x equals pi over 4 and also x equals 5 pi over 4. So now we got the critical values. We also know the endpoints 0 and 2 pi, so we need to test these values. So I'm going to make a table like this, x and f of x table. Okay. So I'm going to put the values 0, pi over 4, 5 pi over 4, and also 2 pi. So if I plug in all these values into the f of x function, f of 0 is going to be equal to 1, because it's going to be equal to e to the power of 0 times cosine 0, or just equal to 1. Then f of pi over 4 will be equal to e to the power of pi over 4 times cosine pi over 4, and that's going to be equal to e to the power e to the power of pi over 4 times square root of 2 over 2. That's pi over 4. And f of 5 pi over 4, after the necessary simplification, it's going to be equal to negative e to the power of 5 pi over 4 times square root of 2 over 2. And f of 2 pi, it's going to be equal to just e to the power of 2 pi. If you take this 2 pi and plug it right here, you get e to the power of 2 pi. So now we're going to look at all these values and try to figure out whichever comes out to be the less, since we're talking about the absolute minimum. So we can say that this value, negative e to the power of 5 pi over 4 times square root of 2 over 2, is the least value. Since this is the least value, absolute minimum value is going to take place at x equals 5 pi over 4. And this is the value of it. Okay, let's move on to part D. In part D, it says, let g be a differentiable function. So this is very important. If a function is differentiable, that also implies that it is continuous at a specific value. We also know that g of pi over 2 is equal to 0. So the graph of g prime is the derivative of g, is shown below. So find, as you can see right here, it says find the value of limit x approaches pi over 2, f of x over g of x, or state that it does not exist, justify your answer. Okay, let me clean up the board first. Okay, part D. Okay, so limit x approaches pi over 2, f of x over g of x. Okay, so if I substitute pi over 2, we get f of pi over 2 over g of pi over 2. So we know that g of pi over 2 is equal to 0. And let's figure out f of pi over 2. So e to the power of pi over 2 times cosine pi over 2. So we know that cosine will take the value of 0 when it is pi over 2. So this is going to be equal to 0. So 0 over 0, this is the indeterminate form. So since g of x is the differentiable function, which means it's going to enable us to apply the L'Hopital rule. So if I apply the L'Hopital rule and take the limit again, we're going to get this. Limit x approaches pi over 2. If I take the derivative of top function, it's going to be equal to f prime x over the bottom function will be g prime x. If you remember the f prime x, it is equal to limit x approaches pi over 2, e to the power of x times cosine x minus sine x over and g prime x. So let's plug in this pi over 2. So e to the power of pi over 2 times cosine pi over 2 minus sine pi over 2 divided by g prime pi over 2. G prime pi over 2. So the pi over 2 is right here. So the g prime pi over 2 is going to be equal to corresponding value is 2. So cosine pi over 2 is a 0. And sine pi over 2 is 1. But there's negative sign. So answer will be negative e to the power of pi over 2 is going to be my answer for the limit. Alright guys, in this problem we've tackled some calculus concepts like the product rule, finding the slope of the tangent line, and finding the limit using the L'Hopital rule. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and comment. See you in the next video. Bye bye.